So you see me, and we're here live in Barbados for CARIFESTA 15. My name is Tennille Clark, Managing Director and Principal Publicist of Chambers Media Solutions, but also your moderator for this very highly anticipated conversation. It's all about boundaries, burnout, and being a creative beyond the canvas, the artist's well-being and status of the artist. And this is, of course, a part of the Big Conversation series. And we're absolutely thrilled that these conversations continue under the astute and forward-thinking leadership of Prime Minister Mia Mottley, who has demonstrated an unwavering commitment to innovation, imagination, and identity that lays the foundation for realizing regional futures. You know, we often say that artists are the ones that hold culture in their hands, who give shape to stories, our sorrows, and our joys. But I want us today to ask ourselves one question: who holds the artist? Because across the Caribbean and the wider global south, creatives give so much of themselves, their vision, their passion, their labor, their hearts, and it's often done without the safety net that other workers take for granted: health insurance, pensions, mental health support, or even simple downtime to rest. And creative labor is often invisible, undervalued, and yet it is still the marching foundation of our cultural sustainability. This conversation, I want us to think about things differently, to see wellness not just as this esoteric luxury, but fundamentally as a public good, to ask ourselves what legal, economic, spiritual, and emotional infrastructures do we need to dignify and protect artistic lives? And how do we care for the people who care for our culture? And our panel today brings us together with voices who have lived this reality, who advocate consistently for better systems, and whose imagined futures of dignity for artists. And together, I'm hoping that we'll explore the personal, the systemic, and the visionary. So let's begin by introducing our panel for today. To my right, I have Dr. Marielle Barrow, who is actually the coordinator of the Big Conversation series. So Marielle, thank you so much for joining us here today. I know that you are extremely busy, so we're deeply grateful for this surprise appearance. To Marielle's left, we actually have Justin Paulion, born and raised in Bridgetown, Barbados. I mean, you're among us here, Trinis here today, but it's all right, it's all Caribbean love. Yeah. Justin actually graduated from the Lodge School in 2008. He studied ballet for 1 year at the Louise Woodvine Dance Academy. He has worked with Of Another Nature, which is a contemporary dance company that received the National Arts Awards for Outstanding Choreography and Performance. He was also awarded the Barbados Dance Theatre Scholarship for a duet performance in his debut at NIFCA in 2008. He's also gone on to be accepted in the School of Toronto Dance Theatre, and since has been honored to work with international choreographers such as Massimo Agostinelli, Kate Alton, Paul-Andre Fortier, Danny Grossman, Christopher House, James Kudelka, Coralie McLaren, Julia Sasso, and Daryl Tracy. Recently, Justin was actually appointed as the National Performance Chair Coach for pop and hip-hop teams. Justin is excited, and he speaks about it consistently, about broadening the horizons in the dance fraternity, and he's also looking forward to the opportunity to share his passion with audiences such as yourselves right here in the auditorium, as well as online at CARIFESTA TV. And last, but certainly not least, we have Malini Joseph. Malini is the fund coordinator at the Caribbean Development Bank's Cultural and Creative Industries Innovation Fund, also known as the CIIF. She is a multidisciplinary creative who has been an active member of numerous performing arts groups and touring contingents for over 20 years. And you know, we come in to ask you to sing a little thing for we in a little bit, right? Right back at you. Malini is also a graduate of the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine, and the Center for Cultural Policy, University of Warwick. And she's also held various developmental, teaching, and administrative roles in the service of the cultural and creative industries, including literary arts, visual and performing arts, and fashion for approximately 15 years. And this is across public, private, and nonprofit sectors. Her ongoing PhD Cultural Studies research at the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine, explores the organization of creativity through ecologies and the value of creative networks and its intermediaries. So I am so deeply grateful to welcome each of you to this panel today. And, this conversation, we in the living room, we chilling, we talking, we having a good conversation, but we doing it with purpose and intention. So this session is designed to be conversational rather than prescriptive. But I really want us to get into the conversation about burnout, because it's something that I think that we all can identify with at some point in our careers, whether, we do creativity on a small scale or it's a bigger part of our lives and livelihood. So let's begin by grounding the conversation in lived experience, because the truth of the matter is that the pace of life and the toll of creative burnout doesn't often become evident until the pain is at an advanced stage. Not so? Exactly. And I feel like artists carry the weight of culture, but too often their own well-being is left unattended. So I want to start by asking about invisible care and visible culture. Dr. Barrow, we'll start with you, because we often say that artists take care of culture, but who takes care of the artist? Who takes care of you? And what are the most urgent gaps in support systems for creatives in the Caribbean? And how do we begin to close them?
So I want to start on a really personal level in that I think one of the first things that I learned is that my art cares for me.
Wow.
And if I don't do my art, I'm not my whole self. So I think that it's important to remember that, yes, your art is supposed to feed you on one level. But then, as we heard from Jawara Aline this morning, you have to have the art that feeds you, and you have to have the art that feeds you spiritually and emotionally. And that is a space where you blossom and you thrive, and your soul finds its voice, and you are able to refresh and restore. But let's say on another level, it's also important to understand yourself and what are your identifiers of burnout. And for me, because I'm not I'm not an extremist in certain ways, the signals are very, very subtle. So I stop eating, or I don't eat on time, or I don't eat healthy meals. I get quiet. They're very subtle signals. And unless you know me very, very well, and unless I know myself very, very well, I would not even recognize the signals. And I've learned through therapy, and I'm not going to say it, I'm going to say it unabashedly, right? That I have to look for those signals and say to myself to stop. And then I also have to recognize that burnout and that depression and that whatever else is a sickness that takes time to heal. So I then need to, if I get to that point, I then have to give myself that 2 weeks or that 3 weeks or whatever to get better. It's not that you pressure yourself more and say, well, I should be doing this and I shouldn't be doing that. Because for me, I would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, do 2 hours of writing or publishing my journal or whatever, and then go to work and then do. And so when I wasn't able to get up at 5 o'clock and do that pre-2-hour work, I thought to myself, oh my God, you're failing, right? And so I think the self-judgment is harsh, and I do think that is where we need to start. Now, I forgot the whole question because there was something else I wanted to say, but
how do we begin to close the gap?
I think community is so critical. And for one, I live in the US now. And, so I'm part of the diaspora. I live in a suburban landscape where, unlike some other areas of the US, there aren't a whole heap of Caribbean people. Mm-hmm. But even more so than that, there aren't a whole heap of Caribbean kind of lifestyle, arts, activities and so on. And so that's a gap for me. And everybody's gap is going to look a little bit different. But I think there's some key things: community, faith, and there's community in terms of the social community, and then there's also your work community, right? The people that inspire you, the people that understand you. Because, some people look at me and say, well, Mara, just get a job now. I say, you know me? You could not know me, right?
Creativity is a job.
But
That's a part of the conversation we're going to have in this living room today.
yeah, I mean, you can't just tell me go and get a job. So I studied for like 40 years almost to just go and get a job. Oh, Maria, you could do administration. Excuse me? You didn't really just call my name. So, you have to be in community who, people who recognize that you have a vocation and you have a calling, and that calling may not make you a whole heap of money, as my mother rightly said. She's like, well, she didn't make a lot of money, but, she did good in society, right? And you know what? Maybe we need to be good with that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Different kind of wealth, right?
Yeah.
I'll stop there.
I feel like the only person on this stage that probably travel more than me is Justin. I mean, Justin has been everywhere from Barbados to Germany to Spain. Like, weren't you in Lion King? In a Lion King, it's actually really, really incredible what he has been able to achieve. But I also know that the creative work that you do is incredibly demanding. And much of it, the mentoring, the community building, the caregiving, it's a lot of unseen work. Even if, sometimes it's difficult to admit to yourself, we know the realities of the profound work that we do in the trenches. How do we make this hidden labor visible and recognized as a legitimate work that deserves support? Because, look, Mariel just said, people are telling her to get a job.
That's true.
Which is...
And it's funny because my story starts, interestingly, I started dancing really late. I started at age 17, as opposed to the 3-year-old kid in ballet class or jazz class from tiny. So I started really late, and I remember after CXC, I had figured out dance was what I wanted to do. Clearly the stages where I clearly belong and felt welcomed and most comfortable. I remember then going to Canada to study at School of Toronto Dance Theatre. The question I got often was, what is your backup plan? And when hearing that about her mom's story, about,
Triggered.
you're not gonna make any more money. And my mom is here; she probably agrees, because before that I was studying aviation, which is a completely flip story.
I mean, flying, but...
I know, right? But in a different
Just
way.
in different ways.
And that stuck with me. I always thought, then why did I have to have a plan B or a second option? Why wasn't the arts or the creative industry enough to feed me, to continue to fuel my dreams, as crazy and as wild as they may seem? And I feel as though I have been able to create a blueprint almost for that living example of what almost seems impossible or should not be possible with the circumstances that we're placed with and the resources. But once again, when that passion and that feeding is more important than anything else and life itself to you, the artist, I think then you're driven with all the passion and all the zeal to go forward. And I feel as though that's exactly what I did. I then sought out to make everyone else feel wrong about asking me about that second option. Why don't we ask the doctor or the ophthalmologist or the accountant about the second option? But there's that level, and I think it starts at the grassroots. I think we have to change our mindsets around arts and the creative industry on a whole, and that it can be your bread and butter. It can support your family, and not only that, but the visceral part that you don't see, the invisible, your soul, your spirit, that part that gives back. And I think that your family, like we just heard, community is just so rooted in making that absolutely possible and flourish.
You know, Malini, what I'm hearing from both Justin and Mariel is directly related to systemic challenges and structural change. And when we move from the personal to the structural, we see that these challenges it's not like an individual failure. So you know how Mariel was saying earlier, she would probably not be able to get up at 5 in the morning and she would feel like a failure. To me, that constitutes the definition of an individual failure. But it's not necessarily that. It's a systemic gap that we seem to be consistently missing. And when you couple that with the economic realities and conversations about financial sustainability, because I mean, Mariel has a daughter, a beautiful 5-year-old daughter that just started school, and I know that is a huge part of her motivation. So when you talk about financial sustainability in the arts as a widespread challenge across sectors, how can we talk more about the ways in which advocacy, policy, and funding might shift to actually support artists' lives and livelihoods?
Thank you. And I'm listening and I'm nodding fiercely because I think we've lived the same kind of lives. And I'm privileged, I think, to be in this part of my life where I'm in a space where these conversations and designs of some of the program work can make those impacts or begin to make those impacts. I think we're living as artists. You're living to survive, and you're if you don't work, you don't eat. So let's start there, right? But also that one gig that you have at Carnival might give you enough to ride you through until June, but the bank does not. That's not a normal flow of income for any other normal,
Systemic.
traditional anything. And I think those are the gaps that then make living gig to gig, even though that is fine. This is the life I've chosen. But how come I still can't plug into the regular system? And I'm working just as hard or even harder. I'm working longer hours. And I don't think that is an invisible kind of scar that most creators or gig economy people walk around with. You cannot start a life in a traditional way. You cannot access security nets of financing. You can't. You have to get someone, a community member, to co-sign a loan with you, And so I think those are the areas that policy and advocacy really need to lean into. And sometimes you have to be the first through the door and lead with your own situation. And I'm bringing it back personal because I think the personal is political and the political is
Yes,
personal, right?
absolutely.
There's no way to talk about this without giving examples. Again, gig economy, right?
Yeah.
Lots of interest, lots of enthusiasm. Still, you go to a financial institution and you will literally, I had to push against a door. And the comment at the end was, oh, this might make a big difference for others like you. But there were lots of days of tears. There were lots of days of, I don't understand. There were lots of, maybe I should just I should just operate like a traditional, and
That's
then
a real job.
yeah, and you have all these degrees and what you're doing with them, and so it's really, like I say, I'm privileged and I have a duty in the spaces that I'm in to push that door first, bring others behind, and then work around those conversations, designing programs and activities that understand the nature of the artist. I think again we keep asking creators to fit into spaces that are harmful.
Yeah. And weren't
Right?
designed for their lived
Yeah.
experience or
Yeah,
existence.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. I have a follow-up question in that case. On the other side of that door, what role should advocacy organizations play in pushing for policies like the health insurance, like the pensions, and like the paid leave? And how can artists join in that fight without burning out further? Because
Right.
that's the balancing act of the day, right?
Yeah. Somebody, again, I'm coming back to somebody has to be the first. Somebody has to take that call to action seriously and take that risk or whatever perceived risk it is. And I think you're seeing it in Jamaica. I'm going to give that example. Jamaica's cultural registry, they have gone and now they are group health insurance plans, etc., for their members. They did it first. People may think it was a little insane, but they have done it, and now others are looking and ready to do it, and they're showing the benefits, right? So I think somebody has to be the first. I think if you have the resources, you find and you collaborate with the right partners to test it and to use it as an example and a framework to go forward. Yeah, yeah.
You know, Mariela, that makes me recall to the grant funding workshop that you worked on earlier this year. I believe it was in collaboration with the CDB. And I want to talk a bit about funding beyond projects, because funding is usually tied to artistic outputs and not artistic well-being. And that is a very hard pill to swallow. So, how might funding models evolve to include mental health access, childcare, or even wellness stipends as legitimate artistic expenses?
Apparently, you left the most
Girl, I'm asking
challenging
the questions
question for
today.
me, but
I'm asking the questions today. We asking this is living room. We had to talk the talk.
okay, all right. So with that living room talk, you know, I think there's an ecosystem framework that is necessary for something like that to happen, because I don't think that the funding agencies are going to take that up on their own, right? And I don't think without the data that they can take that up on their own, because just as creatives have to report to the funding agency what they've done with the money, the funding agency has to report to its donors what they have done with the money. While that model does exist in the US and has become a little bit more
Pliable.
no, it's starting to creep into the region in terms of, you know, you see funds for creative residencies, right? Or funds that support process as opposed to the output of the work. I think that is that's pretty close, right? So I do think that we have made a step forward, and we should give ourselves a pat on the back for that one. What I do think is that the creators have to work in tandem with the funding agencies in advocating for what they want. And what we don't do well in the region is establish associations, guilds, and maintain them, right? And, you know, we have to broker and build that trust amongst the players. And the Big Conversation series and the Symposia series is meant to do that. And, you know, funnily enough, I spoke to one of the dancers who was on the dance panel, and he said to me, you know, we never actually got together and had that conversation. So to answer your question, it starts with us having the conversations, reflecting on our journeys, reflecting on our needs, reflecting on the ways in which these things have manifested in various ways, and then coming up with a framework to address it. And you know, I always have my frameworks, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I have a Caribbean wellness stack ready for you all. But I also think that this notion of wellness you have to dig a little deeper into it. Because for me as an artist, and I know y'all don't know me as an artist, right? But
I do.
People who know me from high school know me as an artist, right?
We all went to the same high school. I think
Right.
we all do.
So, you know, we have to start from there, and we have to think about the things that refresh and revive the artist in their process. For me, that is travel and seeing new spaces. I went to South Africa for the second time, but with a big 10-year gap in between. I felt my most alive self. I felt as though I had reconnected with something that I had completely forgotten existed. I felt like a whole new being. And so I think wellness, for me, and I think for many, is connected to travel and exposure, mobility, because it is being in contact with other communities who share that same spirit of artistic practice that you find renewal, right? And it's through the fusion of art forms, it is through the learning of new practices or the learning of old practices that are somewhere embedded in your DNA. And we had a conversation that talks about that, you know, historic, ritualistic, that memory embedded in your DNA, right, that resurfaces. And we need to take all of this into consideration into the framework of wellness that we talk about for Caribbean.
Justin, I feel like you wanted to
Well,
add.
I keep agreeing with everything Marielle is saying. It's just because personally, then, I mean, from my experience in Lion King, which completely different framework to that in which in the Caribbean. My contract came with a free ticket home every season, free of cost, whenever you wanted. You got your 31 vacation days. It came with health insurance.
Do you need
that
someone to
covered
hold your bottle
everything.
of water when
Even
you're on
something
tour?
as simple as your gym membership was completely covered. So, and Lion King, if you didn't know, the stage is made of steel, which is a little crazy for dancers, but it's those little things. The fact that we have at least 2-3 physios in the theater every day, that you can make an appointment and see them. All those things, a cough. You're not ill, that inhibits you from working and doing the show that day, but you're not well enough to go to work and put on that smile. You can go to the doctor and know that you don't have to worry about the money, the receipts, the prescriptions, because all of that is covered within your contract. And so then I sit here, being back home for a while, having that experience for the past 5 years, and I'm wondering, what are we doing now to get there?
To that point.
Where do we then start to understand that, like Mario said, what is the wellness for us? And it's a holistic sense. Once again, when I first saw The Lion King, knowing that I was going to be in it, the first thing I remembered was being a child and watching it every day on TV. And knowing that Garth Fagan, a Jamaican choreographer, did the choreography for Lion King. It's embedded in our heritage, in the Zulu and Xhosa culture. The songs are not changed in their language or inclination, hence why in the show Caribbean and South Africans are so important to the cast. And hearing Marielle talk about all that in a full 3-dimensional sense, I think that's where the framework needs to start. It really needs to start within us as the person, but us also as the people. And I think my Lion King journey for that was a really big eye-opener. I just remember seeing the animals just coming all over. I started to bawl my eyes out just because of the connection, from the day he arrived on the planet.
Yeah.
That's way bigger than us. The circle of life, we are a part of it. We don't make it. You know what I mean? So the framework has to go and start beyond and deeper than us ourselves. Absolutely.
I feel like the conversation is leading into the arena of freelance precarity and care, which is something that is a big ticket item among creative circles. For Malini, for women freelancers in creative industries, healthcare access is often very complex and very costly. And, navigating personal health, including mental, menopause, fertility, the big ticket, conversations that everybody wants to whisper about it, What cooperative or community-driven solutions could help bridge the gaps where formal systems may be failing?
I think this is a start. I think, and you were talking, and I was just thinking about, why do we think about these things in secret? Why are they invisible? Unless enough of us speak the thing, give a name to it, quantify the things that we need as tools for our work and for our lives, then it's nowhere on the agenda, formal or informal. So I think this is a kind of a start. So I actually think that cooperatives really need to have safe spaces for these types of conversations. That is data gathering in its own way. It's not a commissioned study, but it is data gathering. Because I was thinking again, the reason that some of these tools like physio and all those things are not thought of or not counted as costs is because we just absorb them. As a creative, you just absorb wardrobe. You just right?
do
As
what
a
we
woman
gotta
on
do.
stage, you just, I have to get my hair changed, but you're not actually checking that as a budget item or expenditure against your incoming gig money, right? So we have to be attentive to our invisible tools as well and start to call them what they are, give them price tags, give them a place in the work that we do. And so I think, again, not to put the work on creatives, because that seems to be what is happening, but I think no one else can speak for this space authentically unless it starts in conversations like this that then feed into policy changes, framework changes. I love that there are now more kind of open grants that allow you to have your residencies at your own pace, produce at your own pace, don't produce, right? You know, some of them are there, right? I hope we get there too. Not that you shouldn't report on funding or anything, but understanding the way that the creative needs to breathe, live, work, recharge. It's not a vacation. It looks like, you know, it's a vacation, but it's work. It's real invisible work going on. It's brain work. It's heart work.
Meryl, how do you feel about what Malini just said?
You know, I think there are two sides to it. I remember when I started, and this is unknown perhaps, I started as a full-time artist. I painted for 5 years full-time. That was my first career. No, that wasn't my first. That was my second career after hospitality, because I studied hospitality. And I went over to an artist in Tobago, and I went to Leroy Clark's house, right? Because apprenticeship is also part of this wellness framework, right? And so I apprenticed myself in some fashion or form to artists whose work I had some kind of interest in. And both of them said to me, you have to have the discipline, right? You get up, and at 9 a.m., you paint or you study, but you do the work between 9 to 5. What does that discipline do? It actually does allow for balance, right? And so while I am in full agreement of elevating process, I don't believe that that is distinct from discipline. And I want to, you know, even if your discipline may look different, maybe you work all night, all right? It's not for me to judge. But that discipline must be there, and that discipline must also include stopping and resting.
Can I come in here? I actually
of
wanted to.
course.
So this is again the personal and political. Again, when you don't feed the creative side, right? It comes like a monster. It comes without balance. And so when I'm finished my desk job, work, and all of a sudden my paintbrushes are calling, I am not sleeping. And so who am I? I'm doing a disservice. I have no boundaries or discipline in the thing. And then it all becomes one muddled mess.
Right. And so there is a place for discipline. As much as it doesn't seem to match our natural rhythm of doing things, it will help our overall well-being if somewhere in that, even if it is okay, you go for 2-3 days and you ain't sleep, okay, give yourself for 2 days off, no man. You know, like you deserve that too. You deserve that too. So, you know, but I also wanted to share a story of a Haitian artist who I met. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant mind. Well-known, international. Would go away, paint, perform in the greatest biennials, and then will come home and will be depressed. And I mean like depressed as in not do anything for weeks, not function as a normal human being for weeks. And I'm not going to call names, but he shared that with me because the community could not sustain the richness of the experience of his travel. And I just want to leave that there, right? I'll leave that there for a moment.
Justin, what are you thinking?
I was
know
trying
you're
to
thinking
avoid
that.
it. I was trying to avoid it as much as possible.
Right there. Right there.
It's funny. I feel as though like that literally sounds like a version of me. I left Lion King at the end of 2024. I felt as though I needed a break, a refresh. Just a time out. I missed home. I missed my family and friends, you know, living far away with no one. You don't, I mean, I speak Spanish now, but like, you know, it's a foreign land. You don't speak the
foreign
language.
language.
You don't have the friends. or
Wait,
the
you
support
learned how
system.
to speak Spanish?
Sí, un poco claro. Yo hablo en español. Sí. But yeah, and I just remember coming back home and being excited to come back home. But then when I actually did get back, I stayed in my room in the dark for days. And that was not too long ago. And I just remembered, I don't know what to do. I felt like a fish out of water, being away from home so long. Coming back home and going into like a rehearsal process, the new little, you know, kiddie dancers have no clue who I am. All those kind of things. And I felt like, did I do all of this and sacrificed so much, left my family and everything, signed that contract, not looking back, feeling as if, like, you know, this is the new beginning to the rest of my life. And then, you know, I do decide to come back home, and I wanted to.
Yeah.
But then,
But then,
and I felt so stuck for quite some time. And it's funny that being a part of this was the actual like revamp of me coming out of that hole of depression, crop over in Carifesta, and just wanting to share my experiences abroad, and not just share them, but feeling as though there's value and education in sharing my stories and the experiences that I've had. Because let's be real, young male black dancer from the Caribbean traveling the world doing exactly that and nothing else does not happen for us often. So then coming back home, I felt as though I was going backwards. And it's just interesting now, actually being able to hold this mic and have this conversation, I feel is absolutely fundamental to the process, the frameworks, the logistics that needs to be done, the conversations that need to be had, the economic changes that need to be made, the social mindsets that need to be adjusted. All of that, I think, is rooted in important, vital conversations as such.
but it also speaks to how deeply rich our indigenousness is. The fact that you felt like you needed to come back home to recharge, and you knew that this was the only place that you can get the healing properties that you needed to face another day as a dancer and as a dreamer, I think that is also a very, very important note. So let's talk a bit about the Global South lens, right? Because I remember I was on a panel yesterday, and Mika, she was saying that we are in the era of South to South connections. We don't have to look up north anymore, you guys, and it's happening so quickly.
I don't think we ever had to, realistically.
That
I
is
think we
also
were
something that
forced to.
yeah. But now we have that connective tissue that we are really exploring in this very meaningful way. I mean, look at Marielle going to South Africa. I've been to Ghana twice, like probably in the last 5 years, because my friends own and operate Afrochala Festival. So when you see things like that, but you also see people from the other side of the pond having similar creative experiences to you, it's heartening, but it's also sad at the same time, because it means that we're connecting on a lived experience level, but we haven't quite found the solution to the challenges that we're running into. So when we speak about artists in the Global South facing compounded inequities, what are the lessons that we can learn from our own indigenous community traditions and heritage, or from other regions, about building care systems for creatives? Who wants to take that?
I'll start.
Okay.
Because, you know, one of our presenters for Big Conversations, he's just come in and he messaged me to say, hey, I'm here. I said, hey, that's great. And he's from Ghana, and I visited Ghana. I met him in Algeria. And I said, oh, let's connect. Then I decided on my South African trip, I have to make it to Ghana. So I made it to Ghana, albeit for 2 or 3 days. Then I came to Barbados, and he happened to come to Barbados. Then I brought him to the US and invited him to participate on another Ghanaian partner event. So I was partnered with another Ghanaian company and invited Mr. Sokpe to participate on this panel. Got him to come to the US, so I saw him a second time. Then he came to Barbados for something while I was here. Saw him a third time. Then I invited him back. But I say all that to say that we are also each other's care across the seas, because recognizing your brother or your sister, and I don't say that lightly, right? Because we forge bonds through shared experience, and I almost got kind of disbelief that, wait, now you going through that too? And also going to Ghana, looking like the Caribbean. I say, but why come all the way here for to see a combination of Haiti and Jamaica, right? Anyway, but I think we are each other's care, and that it is really through that community and that networking of networks where we can build a system of care. And we are doing that, through my own company. We've created a Caribbean in Transit consortium. And that consortium already has 5 African companies and 5 Caribbean companies, where we have different skill sets, intellectual property, and so on. That's care. Why? Because if you don't, retain and own your assets, you're not caring for yourself, right? So that community architecture is an architecture of care. And I always refer to a book that I read in sixth form, and Melanie, maybe you read the same book, seeing as we went to the same school. It was Virginia Woolf's To the Lighthouse. Oh, shucks, they changed it. All right. You were disadvantaged, Melanie, because that was a good book, right? Yeah, I know. Nope. Oh, shit. You're all aging me here. You're all aging me. All right, it's okay. Go back and read the book. All right. So the book talked about the wings of a butterfly on the arches of a cathedral. And I never forgot that line, because to me it epitomized the marriage between structure and artistry, and how beautiful it is, how essential it is, how fundamental it is. We can't have care without the system of care, and we have to build our own systems that work for us. And that also has to do with readiness for that South-South dialogue and that South-South connection. Because the reality is, folks, that Africa much bigger than us, right? So we also have to think about that difference in scale and what that means. And we have to care for ourselves in that framework as well.
I feel like Melanie has something that she wants to.
Yeah, my mind.
Your brain
has
is
been going.
braining.
But because I'm bringing it back to the structural. And Mariel, during your time at the SIF Fund, Mariel engineered as well something that we really still run in parallel, a community of practice, and in a sense is a community of care, a community of practice framework that we don't just give you funding from SIF, we also encourage you to give back and network and collaborate, building regional networks, info knowledge sharing again, so that we don't have to make the same mistakes, and that we're all ready to go forward to the thing. So that's what I was thinking of, communities of practice. Those frameworks, even though they are in a very formal space, allow for that same care. And you asked about indigenous practices, and I think about older communities, artistic communities, almost guilds. They worked together. Nobody was particularly afraid of work being stolen because you knew what you were doing and where you fit into that space, and you could commiserate and share, and that's the same idea, I think.
Justin, how did you find your community of care while you were traveling overseas? Because I know that might seem like a very generic question, but there's so many people that are on CARIFASTA TV that, they're probably out in the US or they're out in the diaspora, and they don't have a community around them, and they don't know where to start on how to build.
And that's really true, especially for me. Like I said, Europe, not even English. So it's a little harder, and it was difficult to make connections outside of the theater. And I felt it was very important to make sure I did make connections outside of the theater so I could leave work at some point in time and not always have to be constantly on stage inside the theater. My saving grace, WhatsApp web. A WhatsApp video call saved my life and my existence within the space. I think that was my care. My mom and I had this thing every morning that no matter what time I woke or she would wake, we needed to have a conversation to just check in on me and just how are you doing? And check in on the family at home. And then ever so often, my friends never know how to call or message before they show up or turn up. So many a time I would be having conversations with my mom, and 2 or 3 of them end up popping in the scene. And then the 20-minute conversation turns into an hour. And then my day already feel so much better no matter what may come or what may have been possible. And for me, that was my care. And then, much like Marielle was just saying, across borders and seas and oceans, we share so much more with people than we don't. And being one of the very few Caribbean and then English-speaking Caribbean persons in the cast, I then was forced to connect with like the Africans within the cast because they were the closest things to home, to what I knew familiar. So even to come over to my apartment and cook food and to have a rum and coke because the Africans love a glass of alcohol. You know, so like right away I could relate. And when they're coming, they're not coming with one bottle, they're coming with two. So the evening now turns into a weekend. And then that reminds me of a lime at home when, you know, you call one friend and another happens to come over and she brings two other friends and now it's a gathering. And it was little moments like that, I thought, that really definitely helped keep the care alive. And it's funny because I don't feel as though they ever knew. You know, that the fact that, you know, you coming to work and say, hey, Aibo, and you share some Zulu colloquialism, and I share some Barbadian vernacular, and now for the next 2 weeks, you're yelling at me in some Barbadian word, and I'm yelling back at you in a Zulu tongue, and you know we're sharing, and that in itself just helped me feel so much more at home, although I know I wasn't.
Yeah. So I have a question, and it's all about woman midlife and creative resilience. And before we get there, you never know who coming through in the living room at Big Conversation. So I'm going to take the opportunity to ask Dr. Martina Toby to join us on stage right now. But in the meantime, between time, I want to ask you, Marielle, and you, Malini. You know, many women in midlife face health challenges, including the shifts of menopause. You know, we talk about woman power, but nobody talks about woman responsibility. And both of those things live in the same house. So how do those female centered experiences impact emotional resilience, energy, and creativity? And how should cultural systems respond? And I'm also going to have Dr. Toby when she joins us on stage as well. So, Marielle, if you'd like to start.
Hi. Good afternoon, everybody.
So there's the lime here, right?
This is the line. We're in the living room. We lime in. We lime in.
So, you know, I think that, well, we all went to the same school, right? So Justin, we're gonna adopt you,
Yeah,
but you
I'm
know,
adopted.
this is what we call the bishop.
Congratulations, Justin.
This is what we call the bishop's mafia, right? So, as women, especially coming from that high school, we tend to be kind of driven to a point where we don't know where to stop. And, you know, Malini would attest that I have said this to her a million times. I'm not going to let the secret out of the back. But, you know, we want to be mothers too, right? And sometimes we get so caught up. Some of us, some people don't want to be mothers. I knew that I always wanted to be a mother. And so you get so caught up in, you know, going after this dream and fulfilling this drive that is within you for your art, especially, right? And academia and whatever else. That biological clock ticking thing, you're not quite checking it out. And so we hit a point then where like, oh, wait a second. We getting into that geriatric motherhood category, right? And fortunately or unfortunately for me, that was my reality. I had to pursue motherhood as I pursued my career. I made a plan as to how this was going to happen, and I focused on it and gave it the attention and time the same way that when I was doing my PhD, I said, okay, you're not leaving this seat until you read that book, right? I had to give it that kind of focus. But the reality of waiting so long brings all kinds of other challenges to the fore that nobody told you about. Enter center stage, Dr. Martina Tovey.
Exactly, because I want to be able to let people know, the brilliance of Dr. Toby. So she's a consultant in genitourinary medicine, which is a woman's health specific area of focus. And she's also a menopause specialist and trainer. She obtained her medical degree from the University of Sheffield in the UK and completed her physician training at Guy's and St. Thomas Hospital in London. She's worked as a consultant at Chelsea and Westminster NHS Trust. She currently holds an advanced certificate in menopause care from the Faculty of Sexual and Reproductive Health Care and is a British Menopause Society accredited specialist and trainer. In August 2024, which I think is really important, she relocated to Barbados from London with her husband and her two sons, and she's taken up a role as a menopause specialist and women's health GP at BioConnect Clinic, which is the region's leading menopause clinic. And Martina's always had a passion for helping women. She has dedicated her career, her life, her livelihood to achieving this. And even in her free time, she runs menopause outreach sessions throughout the Barbadian community. And I'm so happy that you're able to join us, not just as a mother and an accomplished professional, but someone that understands the work that needs to be done that gives social impact to the community that you're choosing to serve. So the same question would apply to you. How do we kind of bridge that gap for where we are to where we want to go?
Sure. You make me sound a lot more important than I am. Can I just start with saying that I really resonate with what you said, Justin, about being back home and moving home to be amongst Caribbean people. It's just so nice. Like, I feel just so happy to be here. But to answer your question, how can we bridge that gap? I mean, I see so many women who are in their early 40s or late 30s, and as Marielle says, their biological clock is ticking. That they wish that they had this information before, that they didn't know that, their fertility will start to be compromised. They're going to be entering perimenopause and menopause, and some of them a lot earlier than they realized. And what needs to happen is we need to educate more. We need to let women know that, fertility is a ticking time bomb. There are tests that we can do early to make sure that, so that women know, okay, well, I have this much time left, or I don't have this much time left. And because that could obviously facilitate, well, they might want to plan their lives differently. I know it's difficult as artists to maybe make set plans, but as Marielle said, you could put things into place that might make things a little bit easier, like egg freezing or embryo freezing. So all of that is available in the Caribbean, which a lot of people don't know. And easy to access, but expensive. Yeah. So in terms of bridging the gap, I think education is a major one, and we need to sort of bring women into the fold and make talking about these things, commonplace.
And Malini, from a policy framework standpoint, how do we bridge that gap between the knowing and the doing?
That is the $1 million question.
Yes.
Literally and figuratively. But again, I think, and I stand by the conversations being important. Policy can't be built from a distance. It has to be from the ground. It has to be from the real lives and conversations like this. It has to be from the data, right? But there will be no data if we're not monitoring, sharing, talking about it. And I think I thought about the financial worry as well, right?
Yeah.
Like, we're talking about changing your lifestyle, which is a very real thing. And if you're a gig artist and a gig creative, if you don't work, you don't get paid. So how does then that question of even becoming a mother, considering starting a family, settling somewhere, where does that enter this conversation? And again, I think the policy frameworks around the broader things in inclusion in general, socioeconomic securities, I think will start to even the playing field. But right now, the artist is kind of on the outside of all.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think, yeah.
And you know, the conversation about feminism in general, because this is a feminism conversation, right? But we talk about we talk about feminism, but we don't talk about men's role in feminism. So I'm very curious to also hear Justin's perspective in that regard.
And it's funny. I mean, I have been hearing and seeing my female counterparts, you know, struggle with this from school days. And teachers will always reiterate to the female dancers that, like, for instance, your menstrual cycle does not stop you from coming to school, does not stop you from taking class, does not stop you from training and doing the show. But then I would then have another experience with my sister, for example, who now on a morning, I would see when she's going through her cycle and has a bad cycle, is unable to completely leave her room. So then how am I a male teacher, and now me even as the national chair coach and as a dancer, majority of my POM and hip hop girls, majority of the team are all female, and they're all teenage girls. How do I look at a 16-year-old girl who's having a bad day and tell her, well, you need to suck it up? You know, the competition is tomorrow or next week. Like, do I have the place to do that as a male who really doesn't understand? But I have seen kinda and lived in certain versions of that. And then once again, like in my Lion King experience, now there was a lady who was married and everything in the show to one of the guys who was technical, and she got a baby, and they were both given maternal leave with pay. For, like, she got 10 months,
Wow.
and I think he got like 6. So, and I guess those are then conversations that you need to ask in terms of the legal ramifications and the systemic work within. Is the female dancer or the male dancer who has a wife and looking to build a family, are they just as validated to have that time off with pay? And not have to be worried in the gig environment or not. And I think it is a question to be asked.
Dr. Toby, I know that you do a lot of the work that you do is on the medical side of the fence, but when you're speaking about, you know, those socioeconomic considerations, I do believe that to a certain degree that comes as a huge part of the work the groundwork that you're doing in the communities. What are the kinds of conversations that you hear on the ground about, you know, reflecting on those realities from women?
Well, a lot of the time, you know, for instance, some of the things that, like, okay, for instance, insurance. Like, a lot of the freelance workers are not insured, whereas, you know, and someone who's employed at a corporation or something will have insurance policies to cover them. So that's a big one, because, as you know, you have to pay for everything in Barbados, or use the national health system where you'll be waiting for years to have a procedure potentially. So it's difficult for people to access the care because of money, just basic things really. For instance, if a woman can pay for care and is freelancing as an artist, what about time off after an operation? You know, that's time where she's not employed, she's not earning. You know, that can have serious repercussions for people. And also things just like maternity leave, you know, no maternity leave, as you said, is being given. That would really impact on someone's decision whether or not to have a baby in the first place.
And it goes right back to that grouse that Malini was talking about earlier about the gig economy, right? Like, how do we help people to help themselves under those circumstances where they feel that resources are so far-fetched and so limited, and on top of that, it's compounded by the reality that they may not have that community of care around them that we were speaking about earlier?
Is a really complex question, but I think we pull in some answers out. I think what has been recurring here is we hear in the insurance conversation, the maternity and paternity, that they leave.
Yes.
Again, I mean, I don't even think outside of the creative space, that in itself as a general piece of kind of policy work needs some work in the region. And I think if those things are in place, people will be more open to setting their boundaries and setting a plan, and feeling like they have choice.
Dr. Barrow?
So we talk about policy, we talk about government's responsibility, but I also want us to think a little bit about the rest of the ecosystem. And, recently I have a aunt slash colleague, I've known her since I was a kid. And she and I have long, since I was here at CDB, been talking about starting a collectors society for artists, for art collectors, to build collecting as a culture and a practice in the region, and to bring young collectors into the fold to understand that art is one of the very few assets that appreciates with time. Okay, that sounds far-fetched. What am I talking about? Okay, so we brought together at her new gallery, Brushstrokes, in Barbados, in Pelican Village. Beautiful space. And she brought all of her friends together who are collectors, including a couple young persons who were like, okay, I want to see what this is all about. And I spoke a little bit, and we did a little brainstorming session about what this collectors society should look like. And we're not calling it a society, right? But this group. What should we be doing? And apart from classes and, arts appreciation classes for them, collectively we decided, you know what, let's start a fund, our own little fund for artists, that we give them some money to do whatever it is they need to do, to travel, give them some money to do a class and whatnot. And those kinds of spaces are spaces where we can informally start the practices. And I think it is really, really important also because so many times if you do something from the government level down, you don't quite get it right. Because the blanket policy may not really be reflecting what is needed on the ground. But when you start something from the seed, the ground up, and you start it small, you have the ability to test it, to try it, to see what is the framework that actually is needed and works, and then to build it into something bigger. So let's suppose, right, that this collectors society, and its dentists and, people owning practices on their own and whatnot, who are part of this society, who have given space to artists, incidentally, that's one of the things they've done to allow artists to flourish, decide, you know what, so-and-so is going to have a baby. Let us, for 3 to 6 months, provide for that baby and provide the services that she needs during that time. That is an informal practice that can have immense, immense, immense impact. And you know what, as a community effort, it's not that huge, right? Because, secondhand clothes work, right? And, somebody might have a voucher for somewhere, and somebody else would give something, and somebody else would give space. And as a community, that same concept, we talked about indigenous or local practices, that same concept of the susu and the gayap and the different words for it, and it exists in Africa and elsewhere in different forms, that's what we need. And when we can start to do that, I think we can start to inform policy in a more meaningful way and really build the systems that are effective for us.
We're talking boundaries, burnout, and being a creative. I'm so happy that we are all able to come together and have this conversation in the midst of all of the incredible CARIFESTA 15 energy. I want us, Justin, to turn our gaze to the idea of limitless possibility. What would it mean to treat wellness as a public good, not a privilege, and to imagine a future where artists can thrive with dignity?
I remember when I got the email from Marielle, and I was just like, oh my God, I was so excited to be a part and chosen for this. Because like I keep saying, I just feel as though what I have to share is valuable. And I remember just reading through the main question point, and it spoke about the legal, it spoke about the economic, the spiritual, and emotional. And I just felt like there was one thing missing for me personally, and that was like the social. And I think for me, that's where it starts. I think once again, we live in a Caribbean where dance and art is not seen as a full-time job, as simple. So hence, there's not the funding, there's not the support. I remember my first time when I was going to Toronto once again, writing to so many different places for grants and funding and la-di-da, because I started late, it's just me and my parents, and like they have no idea how this works either. Also being the first person from my family to have a tertiary education. So, like all of those things then really play a huge role in the outcome. And I think, like I said, it starts at the ground roots. I think we need to start to change minds that, I don't have to be only an academic, that your arts and your creativity can take you just as far, if not further, as long as your heart and your passions and your drives and determination, everything is within the right space and within the right direction. And I feel as though we just need more examples.
Yes.
I remember just also thinking, what if I had a me when I was 17? Right. Someone to talk to and ask those questions, like, how do I get from here, being in Barbados and being talented and having an idea, to actually in that school working with teachers and choreographers who can give me the information that I need to take on the world.
Yeah. Dr. Toby, when you're looking at well-being as a public good against the backdrop of family and cultural expectations, if we were to see wellness as this microcosm of public good and as a foundation for cultural sustainability, from your viewpoint, having done the work in the community, what policies or partnerships do you think we have to prioritize immediately to turn that principle into reality?
That's a tricky one. I guess really you'd want to partner with people like, tertiary education, universities and things like that, so that people who are graduating in artistic spaces will have the information they need about wellness. Because wellness is not just health, physical health, it's mental health, it's emotional health, and all of that, as I said before, it just needs to come. People need to know about these things, and they really don't have that information available to them in the Caribbean, as I would like to see.
And Dr. Barrow, beyond the spiritual and emotional dimensions and the economics and the policy, how does spirituality, community rituals, and cultural traditions provide healing and resilience for artists? As someone that has practiced art for a 5-year period and has now gone on to what I can only qualify to be a social impact executive, how does providing that healing and resilience for artists help? And how does those practices in turn become intentionally nurtured? Because you've been on both sides of the coin at this point. So your lived experience is quite broad and very, very helpful and enriching to this space for people that are looking for that kind of advice and guidance.
Well, firstly, I would have to say that art is spiritual. For me, art is spirit. For me, it's spirit-led, it's spirit-infused, and it's a spiritual practice because it is really about getting into yourself and finding a different level of meaning and intentionality and being. So there's that. But I really think it comes back to community. I mean, we've said it all along the line. And I think that these big conversations are about forming that community with all the different elements that we may not have thought of, like Dr. Toby. But Dr. Toby was so essential in my own personal journey, right? And when I looked at it and I recognized that, I was like, yeah, well, she needs to be in on the conversation. And I love what she said about speaking, partnering with universities. Because if we thought really that far, to train young women to plan to create the roadmap for their career with an initial understanding of women's health, we would be in a completely different place. Yes. Oh my goodness. Yeah. If we were actually to start, she said that and I was like, oh yeah, that's a missing part of the framework. right? So I think that, and Melania and I know this conversation a lot, right? Because, Marielle and transversality, right? My favorite word, right? So, people who know me know that I have some words: transversality, praxis. Right. But here comes the transversality again, right? We do not live in a decompartmentalized society. We are not Western people. And when you put us there, we little bit of an ill fit sometimes, right? We live in community. And we have to understand the strength of that community in creating the infrastructure and the framework for the things that we need. And so I think that Dr. Toby is an essential part of this conversation, because these things actually do affect how successful women are in the field. These things do actually affect how much they can cope with the stresses that life throws at them. And if we don't, and if we don't put this in place as a key factor and figure in their growth map and in their growth plan, then I think we're doing a disservice to our younger selves. Right? So if I had to tell my younger self to do it earlier, I might have tried to be a little more focused on that a little earlier, I may not have read all the books, I don't know. Maybe I would have done things differently, right?
But then maybe you may not have had you might have had the amazing artistic success that you would have had because you may have gone down of, family roots in your early 30s.
There's so many maybes, right?
Yeah, true.
There's so many maybes. But I think, you asked some complex questions at Tennille, first of all.
Yeah.
I thought that was my thing, right? But you took the cake. You took the cake.
We
You
all
actually
went to the same high school. I'm not sure what it is you was expecting.
I don't know, right? It's all good. It's all good. I'm up for it. No, but I think I think the answers are here.
Yeah.
And I don't want to go much further than that. I really think the answers are here. I think just this, collective of
Living room conversations.
and lived experiences that are blended on some level or have started in the same high school and have, gone into all these different paths are essential, because Tennille as a PR specialist knows how to get this word out there, right? Dr. Toby as a health specialist knows how we should be caring for our bodies. As a dancer, Justin also knows how we should be caring for our bodies, right?
Also caring for our joy.
And caring, right? Melanie is also an artist, even though she's wearing this hat of policymaker at this time. I have lost my art, and I don't know what hat I'm wearing now, but it's all good.
But Melania also have to sing for us at the end here too. You can't
singing,
come
I will
in
give it 2
people and
mics.
them big conversations, living room, and you can't come here and you ain't singing for us, right?
But wait. Then we'll have to ask Justin to dance.
Oh!
Marielle, this is when you said we can't ask you to paint.
Right.
Because you don't
I don't have
your
the
equipment.
tools.
We're just gonna
It's
have
a
like
wooden-
a
it's a wooden
whole
floor, boys.
workshop
Yeah.
going on.
I won't be able to
alright.
show
I have
my best
one
work.
condition.
I
One
understand.
suggestion or condition.
Okay.
If we run the Carrie Festa jingle again, we can all join.
Okay,
in.
so
right,
I feel like we can work that out with the tech team. I feel like that's a good trade-off. Let's start imagining a future of dignity, because at the center of boundaries, burnout, and being a creative, at the center of being a still life, real pain, at the center of wanting to be seen and to see others, we have to start imagining the future that we want, not for ourselves, because the reality is that we may not see it in our lifetime, but we have to see it for Dr. Barrow's daughter or Dr. Toby's sons, you know what I mean? So imagine we're in 2040. That's not that far. That's like about 14 years. We're still gonna be out there and outside, you know what I mean? But imagine it's 2040 and artists in the Caribbean living in a space that is filled with dignity, security, and care. I'll start with Dr. Toby. What did we do between 2026 and 2040 to make that possible? Think about your boys. Even if you it's difficult to think about it in the scope of your professionalism, which I'm sure it's very easy to do. But I'd like to look at that generational lens as well. What did we do between now and 2040 to create a society of creatives that is filled with dignity, security, and care? And that question is for everyone on the panel.
Okay, I would say, so first of all, we normalized health conversations, right? We normalized menopause, we normalized aging. You know, people were encouraged to come forward on, you know, for medicals to make sure that, you know, any health problems were picked up early. And we created a platform, maybe as Marielle said, a collective platform where we pooled resources so that everybody could, you know, access care, and, you know, there was equality on board, and people had that access to the things they needed to.
Justin?
For me, when Marielle talked about like her experiences going over to Africa, and just we need to think about scale and size. I think that's where that's where I would start. First of all, I think to take ourselves seriously in the big bad world, we need to come together. First of all, I think the Caribbean as a whole has so much to offer the world, especially as it relates to arts and our creative industries. We have something that's definitely unique and indigenous to us. It is definitely marketable, and it stands alone. And I think as long as we start to see the strength, the value in that, in ourselves and us as a people, I think then the rest is history. We just need to start to see the bigger picture, and believe that it is bigger than ourselves, and it is achievable, although it may not seem tangible or reachable, within reach at that point in time. I mean, I don't think at 17, I ever thought I would make it to Lion King, knowing that I watched it on television all this time.
That still blows my mind.
So like, for me, it's just simple. If I could do it, you could do it too. And I think we just need to start thinking like that more often, where the stars are not far enough.
The stars are not far enough. Melanie?
I've been thinking about it. I'm seeing my nieces, my nephews, having enough of a safety mechanism to fully explore every part of their creativity safely, and not have to try this dancing balance that I have found to be my life. And I enjoy it, but if there was another way to do it, maybe I would be there. All the maybes. But my niece loves anything creative, and I want her to feel so free and so comfortable in her skin to just do what she's called to do at whatever time. But I was doing the math too. I think we would be at CariFesta 22 by then. Yeah. And so my vision too is that CariFesta 22, if my math is right, is a place that continues to foster that community, that cultural exchange, that cultural confidence that makes us think that we could be bigger than big, right? Yeah, that is my vision for 2040.
Dr. Barrow?
So I want to piggyback on something Dr. Toby said, and also something Justin said, and also something Melanie said, right? So firstly, there are two other persons that I know from the Caribbean who danced for the Lion King. One for more than 10 years and became a lead, led the cast and whatnot. Names are not coming to me because I'm beyond 40. Zara Bartels, thank you. And Mika Marguerite Cooper. Yeah. So I know two persons who also danced for the Lion King. Sure, there are more. So I think we need to elevate our cultural icons as cultural icons, because we tend not to do that unless they're soca artists, right? Yeah. We have stars right here in our midst. So that's one thing I want to say, that we need to do that and put their names up big and bold and tell their stories. Secondly, in terms of what Dr. Toby said in terms of pooling resources, I think if we start that informal practice of communities, creating this susu that supports artists' well-being, then we can ask for matching funds from institutions. to create those initial resources. And those initial resources can also be to pay for the insurance, right? So that it starts to build a system. It is a seed to build a system that grows. And then thirdly, piggybacking on what Malene said, I also have a niece who is a brilliant artist, Annabelle. And I mean brilliant. You know, my sister's like, oh my God, how did she take so much after you? God has a sense of humor, right? Now, I also think my daughter has a talent. So, whew, it's going to be a lot. But we have to want it for our kids. And we have to be committed to do differently for our kids. I don't know how to say that deeply enough because I think sometimes as a people, we forget the succession planning. Also something that you'll have heard me talk a lot about, right? Malene was my succession plan. She was younger than me. By the time that I had a baby, I was like, yeah, peace out, right? So succession planning is critical. And part of that succession planning is putting the systems in place for our young people and allowing them to grow in it, and then through it, and then beyond it. What comes beyond?
And this is You See Me, Boundaries, Burnout, and Being Creative. And as we draw this conversation to a close, I hope that we as a panel have been able to remind everyone that is looking on, both in the audience here and on CARIFESTA TV, that culture doesn't just live in buildings and in archives. It lives in bodies, it lives in voices, in the hands and hearts of artists. And those bodies need care. Those voices need rest. Those hands need security to continue shaping who we are and who we will become. Today we have named the realities. We've spoken it into being. Burnout, precarity, the weight of invisible labor. We have challenged the structures that leave artists unsupported, and we have dared to imagine something different. A future, a Caribbean future, where wellness is not just a privilege, but a public good. And as the Barbadian poet Kamau Brafitt once said, the unity is submarine. Because beneath the surface, across our islands and our struggles, we are connected. Don't let anybody convince you of otherwise. We are 100% a connected, tapped in, innovative, incredible community. And if we built that unity into policy, into advocacy, into practice, then the care of the artist becomes the care of the culture. And at this time, I would like to sincerely thank Dr. Barrow, Malene, Dr. Toby, Justin, an incredible panel for their honesty, their wisdom, and their courage in naming what so often goes unseen in Caribbean circles. And I want to thank you, the audience that is here today, as well as the audience that is online, for leaning and learning into this conversation with care and imagination. What we've shared today reminds us to protect culture in different ways. We must protect the people who create it. Wellness is not extra, it's essential, and the dignity of the artist is the dignity of our societies. So I hope that we are able to leave here today, not only with more questions, because questions is good, but with commitments to make visible the invisible work, to advocate for structures of dignity, and to insist that sustainability in the arts begins with sustaining the artists. Because to care for our culture, we must first care for our keepers. With that being said, thank you so very much. We had a wonderful time in our big conversations, living room, and continue to enjoy the CARIFESTA 15 experience. See you tonight at the Village, and take care.
us the gap.